the same language that you would use if you were presenting yourself in a certain light in a job interview or one of those high stress settings. It actually is a little bit less formal than that. We're going to see your critical thinking and directive following skills. There's a word count, there's there's an initiative, there's a directive with this assignment, and this is going to allow you to demonstrate that you can follow those instructions, because even if you have a great essay to share, it does have to fit the MO. It has to be the correct assignment and answer the question. So that's going to be something that we're looking for. As I mentioned, different schools are going to assign a different value to the essay. The larger the institution, often the fewer minutes they'll spend reading your essay, and the more they may be focused on your English speaking and basic writing ability. It may not be necessarily about the topic as much as some of the smaller or highly selective institutions. They are known to put more emphasis on the essay in general, but these are generalisms. We're going to look for the effort made to write an engaging essay. Is this something that you took some time to write and you did a thorough job of thinking through and editing it? We want to see evidence that you didn't just write it in one sitting. That can be very difficult for us to see what your personality and I'm going to make this bigger for you if it's hard to see. If your personality is able to come through in your writing, and if you're someone who writes well, because in our coursework, that's going to be something that's very important to be able to do regular writing assignments. In the whole United States, we are going to put less emphasis on exams than in general you see outside the country. So for example, I know of students who've come to us from the UK that tell us like 80 or 100% of their grades are coming from one single sitting exam. That's not very much true in the United States, especially at the smaller colleges. Regular writing assignments are going to be expected of you. A way to jumpstart how you're going to do your essay would be to brainstorm early on, sometimes months in advance. If you're a junior right now and you're looking to apply to the US this fall, then you are right on track to be very comfortably positioned. We're going to ask you to really think about what you would do to tell someone an essence of yourself. What would you do or say that is something that you think is unique to your perspective? It does kind of need to have a purpose or a thesis. As I said, it's not meant to sound like a lab report, but it does need to have a theme or a meaning where we can see from the beginning to the end what a change or a conflict or a realization or a point of growth was for you. Some common pitfalls to avoid. Don't write the essay that you think a college rep must want to hear. I think students often picture us as being very professorial with tweed jackets and elbow patches, and that they should write something that makes themselves sound very altruistic or fit a certain mold, the perfect college student. Those essays, if they're a little not genuine, are going to come across that way, and it is going to take away from the overall impression of the essay. Most of the people reading your essays aren't that stiff, pretentious person that you may picture in college admission. They're going to be in their 30s. They're going to love reading modern fiction and nonfiction. They're going to be people who are closer to your age than you might think, closer to your age than not, in fact. And so write to that audience that you know is genuinely listening to what they want to hear of a young person's voice. You don't have to sound 15 years older than you are. Include details to show us. Don't just say, for example, that you're a funny person. That's a statement that tells. Use statements that show, demonstrate. This can be anecdotally, you can use metaphors, you can be a bit creative in your writing. Again, it doesn't have to sound like a job application. And so you can show us the kind of person that you are. Many students, common pitfall, they make the mistake of making the essay into a sales pitch. The essay question is not, why are you going to be a great college student? Why has it always been your dream to be a college student? That's a sales pitch that is not going to come across well in a personal essay, which, as I said, is that assignment that we're seeing if you take on. We've had students who will choose to do something a bit out of the norm, like write a recipe. That was something they did a lot 10 years ago. To make me, you need a scoop of kindness and 2 tablespoons of creativity. And sometimes those essays do come across as a bit gimmicky or a little bit salesy. So your essay really should be your genuine voice. And if you're someone who is naturally humorous or witty, that's fine. If you're someone who's naturally serious, that's fine as well. I've read excellent essays from students. One of them, it was probably the best essay I've ever read, and I've read about 10,000 essays at this point. The student wrote about learning to drive, and it was humble. It was not earth-shattering. He didn't save anyone's life. He was just a stressed young person learning how to drive, worried he was going to run into something. And that's very relatable. It was funny. He was describing how driving the car felt like piloting a boat because it was his grandfather's enormous sedan. It was humorous, relatable, likable, humble. Great personality traits came through that funny essay. I've also written essays I've read essays by young people who are incensed about the state of the political world around them, the human rights violations around them, and they write incredibly elevated, compelling, brilliant, globally minded essays that I know, because they're so genuine, do represent that person's honest personality. They are someone who genuinely watches the news. It has political interest, has concern about the state of something, and they're a serious person. Equally good. Whatever is genuine is best. One super common pitfall I see all the time is what I call the don't skip leg day essay, which is kind of a joke if you're familiar with the idea of people who just work out all the muscles that you can see when you're wearing a tank top. So pretty much just from the belly button up. And the don't skip leg day essay is where the top half of the essay is incredibly well edited. It is carefully crafted, reread, retooled, lots and lots of showing rather than telling. And the further it goes on, momentum is lost, or energy is lost, or editing tapered off, or the student just didn't know how to write a conclusion. And so the essay that started out so broad and muscular and perfect up top kind of trickles and trickles and trickles down to standing on the tiniest little thread of an ankle that ends with an I don't know how sentence like, and that's why I want to join the university of whatever. So I encourage students to write a balanced essay. It might be something that has a cinch or conflict or change in the middle, but it has equal effort and balance from the beginning to the end, just as anything with a hypothesis or thesis would. This is a super common essay error that I see, especially from international regions of the world. This isn't something that happens domestically in the US as much, because for exactly some of the reasons I have been emphasizing, this is a student who felt they needed to do absolutely the most formal, the most elevated sounding essay that they possibly could. This first sentence here: the transition from child to adulthood is a significant event in any individual's life. People always possess the potential for growth and further development. There comes an occasion in life, however, that marks a major turning point in this process. All of this is too much of a lead in without actually going in. It's very elevated. It's someone who's trying to sound like they're looking back on long decades of life, but this is a young person. This should sound like someone who, if they've had a significant realization, relates it not like a 75-year-old. They should relate it like an 18-year-old. And so this essay, it makes a very, very common mistake of over formal, over stilted writing, though it is technically very grammatically correct. And so if you have a peer editor, if you have a mentor that's helping you, this essay will pass with flying colors in some reviews. However, it's not going to really fulfill the capacity of what the personal essay is supposed to be. Now, this is an example of a really, really great opening, which is a way to hook or engage in people to want to learn more about you and be excited to read the rest of your essay. According to the official, but not so trustworthy public statistics, the average height among males in the Jiangsu province is 177 centimeters. On a good day, with the help of a pair of shoes and the right hairstyle, I convince myself I am taller than the published average. Now, this student is really funny, and he's showing us he's funny. He doesn't say, I'm funny, I make my friends laugh. He's showing us that he is someone who can be intrinsically humorous and also humble. So again, your essay doesn't necessarily have to be about you saving a baby kitten from raging floodwaters and being a hero. That's a common mistake, is thinking that you have to be the hero of the essay. This one is going to be something that, a little bit like that essay about learning to drive, is genuine, humble, relatable, likable, and it's unique. This person is writing about what it feels like to be shorter than average. And he even goes on to say he watches his classmates growing like bamboo shoots in the spring rain, but he's enjoying the shade of the surrounding bamboo forest. That's, again, a super funny metaphor. And it shows qualities of a higher level of writing in that he's using that continuing parallel. And so this is an example of someone who has really hooked in the reader to thinking, I think I like this person. I think I'd like to know more about them. And their essay, it happens to be humorous, but of course that's not a requirement. And it's deftly done. It's very well done. Here is another great opener that's in a very different vein. This one starts, I still remember the day clearly, September 13th, 2008. It was a Saturday, my favorite day of the week. I got to indulge in all my desires at the local market, watch Rahul, my favorite magician, read books at bookstore, and of course, a stop for chocolate ice cream at Nerula's. This bustling scene at market was typical, a streaming hodgepodge of otherworldly sights and smells. This is an excellent opener because I am immediately transported to this street. If I recall correctly, this is an essay from India, and it's very descriptive. And you feel like you can kind of see in your mind's eye this bustling, busy Indian street and these favorite shops, the magician, the bookstore, the chocolate ice cream. And the specifics here are important. The name of the magician may not be something that changes your perception of who this person is, but that detail adds a kernel of richness that improves the essay. Now, this essay is actually about being present in the market when there was an act of terror. And so it takes a very different turn. It is a very serious essay, but this opener is something, and the date kind of lets you know that something very significant is going to happen. But this person wrote a very thoughtful, descriptive, rich essay about that very, very dramatic event. Here's an essay, again, that has a great opener, and I referenced this type of essay earlier when I said that sometimes it can be a serious thing that you believe in, you see around you, or you would change if you could change something about the world. This one is about coming from a country where there is starvation and malnutrition, yet tons of liters of milk and masses of food are offered to deities and going to waste in temples. A motherland where 15 days are dedicated to worshiping the goddess Durga each year, yet a majority of women face social evils and gender barriers. So this essay I absolutely loved because I felt that it was going to teach me something that I could never know not being a native of this area. It's a very authentic voice and it is very informational, but it's done so in a way that doesn't take itself so seriously that it sounds stilted or condescending. And so I loved that I learned from this essay and I could feel the passion that this individual had for what they saw as a social change that they urgently wanted to see enacted. And so this essay, again, of all different types you've been able to see here, very effective, very interesting one. Students from Greece can talk about their countryside, their history, their relationship with their grandparents out in the farms, the changes that they have seen throughout their life, the economic turmoil we've had in the last few decades. You can be someone who is reflective and serious and write an excellent essay. You can be someone who is humorous and light and writes about the trials of being short, and you can write an excellent essay. Here's one more example of an excellent opener that takes a serious topic right from the beginning. You're grabbed by this. And this student is from China. It goes, according to the government records, my 12-year-old brother Zi Cheng does not exist. Well, that sure dials me in. He goes on to say, my parents are not permitted to have a second child due to the one-child policy. This is going to be another example of one of those essays that from the very first sentence, you're going to learn something. It is a little bit dramatic to imagine that someone doesn't exist on paper. And the essay was also about how much this individual respects and loves his brother, and that theme of but he doesn't exist on paper is at odds with that. And that also brings me to one other part of the way sometimes young people can surprise you with their exceptional maturity, the personalness. This essay is about love and respect for his younger brother. And of course, you can recognize that normally that's a relationship that involves competitiveness and rivalry. It's just sometimes how families go. But this essay was peaceful and thoughtful and respectful and loving, and made this individual come across as very deep and very family oriented. And so this essay was exceptional as well. because of those character traits that it shares, in addition to, of course, having this really riveting opening sentence. You can have a very moving essay that shares your character, whether or not you have something dramatic to share. It can just be something about family, if that's something very pivotal for you. Okay, now I've gone through a number of examples because I know that can be very helpful to you as you're trying to decide what you want to write about and how to avoid some of those super common pitfalls that a lot of students run into as they're trying to brainstorm and choose a topic. And often students, I know, will beat themselves up a little bit, worried that they've chosen the wrong topic or they're going down the wrong road because their essay doesn't sound like the rest of their friends' essays or what they think the essay is supposed to be like. So I hope I've given you the impression that you can write on just about any topic, something personal, something humorous, something you've observed, something cultural, everyday for you, but very unique for your Western US college campus readers. Any of those topics has the potential for a great essay if you write with craft, if you write from the heart, and you avoid some of those common pitfalls like cliches or telling rather than showing. And so if you craft that writing well, just about any topic is going to serve you well. Okay. We can take any questions that folks might have if you enter them into our chat, and I'll be happy to field questions, whether or not they're of course specific to my type of institution. I'm here to chat about writing and writing workshops, and so you can ask questions that would apply to other types of school and the state universities as well.
So yeah, I think we're going to get some questions in the chat. I'm looking at it in the YouTube. So let's see. Perhaps I'm not seeing any yet, but I am thinking one that might be forming in the minds of my students, judging from what we do at the farm school. I thank you so much. First of all, very, very useful and deep observations about how these things fit together. And I was thinking about what you said early on, Carly, about the non-academic kind of writing that still needs to be polished. And I was wondering if you gave us some ideas for the different topics that the students can take on to write a non-academic, creative nonfiction type of essay that still needs to be very polished, obviously. And I was wondering if you can also talk a little bit about editing strategies for the students to get it to that polished level without losing their voice in the meantime.
Of course, editing is going to be very pivotal. I have a few suggestions. One of them I mentioned was certainly getting started early. So you're well positioned now to do that. Begin brainstorming what some different topics might be for you, and don't get wedded to just one idea, because what you'll find as you go through the process is that the first most pivotal thing that you think of that formed you as a person or is unique about your perspective may or may not be the perfect topic, because your colleges are going to be reading it, so it does have to be an appropriate topic to put you in your best light, and it also has to fit into 600 or so words. And so there may be something that you get attached to very early on that is simply not a story that is going to fit. It's not going to encapsulate or fill the correct word count. And so that is a reason to say, I'm not married to this one topic. I have to choose the right thing for the assignment, as it were. The college essay is kind of an assignment. The other thing is to brainstorm in non-academic spaces. So when I was in college and graduate school and had to write pieces that were being requested as long as 50 pages, some of the writing assignments, creative nonfiction, were as long as 75 pages. And I found that when I sat down, pen and pencil, notebook, soft music, desk, computer, that wasn't necessarily the environment that the best, most creative ideas occurred to me in. Sometimes it was laying in bed at night. Sometimes it was standing at the bus stop listening to music, walking, exercising, joking around with friends. I used to be on the roof of our third-story building. I lived in an artist colony with other writers and people interested in theater and art, and I used to cut hair because everybody was frankly so broke that they couldn't go to the hairstylist. And so I would cut hair on the roof. And And sometimes that would generate the most creative, thoughtful, poignant moments. Cutting hair, watching the sun going down over the cityscape up on the roof, and the wind blowing by, and having to hold the hair down and cut it. Sometimes you're not in these formal academic library style spaces when you think of an image that you're like, this is really unique, and I can share this in a way that makes other people feel like they're transported there, and they share that image in their head. So be open to possibly keeping a notebook or having a way to retain those ideas or moments of creativity outside of school hours, study hall, library, designated formal, I'm just going to sit down and work on this kind of times. Feel free to start an essay and then put it down, or try something else and then come back to it. The beauty of starting the process early is that you have the freedom to give yourself some breaks. You don't have to cram your brain full of writing prompts. You can start on one essay, take a week off, come back, reread it with a fresh perspective, edit yourself, of course, at that point. Then also have time to ask friends and peers who are not themselves crushed by deadlines to read something for you. And when you have something that you feel might be that draft that you've worked on and worked on and worked on, those fresh eyes of a peer can tell you, well, this sounds like, frankly, honestly, a little sappy. Get someone who's going to be honest with you and not just tell you that they love you and you're doing great. Get someone who reads or likes writing themselves and is going to give you honest, constructive criticism, because that's what's going to improve your essay. College admissions offices expect that you're going to have some other folks read over your essay and give you feedback, so there's nothing wrong with that. They just don't want anyone to write it for you. So your own writing, your own thoughts, but of course your mentors, your college guidance counselor, your friends, your mom, anyone you like, can give you feedback on how best to share that pivotal moment or that perspective or that opinion or whatever it is you'd like to write about in your personal essay.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. I was thinking about these amazing moments that where these ideas can come, to you, and I'm thinking, yet you do need to have that time to put this down, on paper, right? And a lot of our students, I think, especially because it's a foreign language, as they write, they think of it as an assignment. But it's so important, as you say, to get that inspiration from so many different places. I was also thinking about the time, what you said about having enough time, which helps with that editing, that helps with that possibility to change your mind, go to a different idea, try them both out, and see where that leads you. But also the difficulty for an international student to understand what it is that would be interesting and different to a U.S. college admissions representative, and without trying, as you said, to think that we know what they want to hear, because we don't. And people are so different, and we all change with what just happened this year, right? We all have this difficult year of a pandemic, and in some ways it's so similar as an experience, and yet it's so different because of where we all are. So the students they can, I think, find this way to relate to any audience, and yet just be the particularities of their own lives that need to shine through. And so I wonder how we look for these moments that are particular to our life experiences, and maybe very interesting for a Greek student, for example, to write, but we don't think of it as folklore as we're thinking of our I think you give us some great examples, but if you want to elaborate a little more on that, I think this is one of my trickier kind of work with my students, as I try to have them just move from what they think needs to be universal and talk a little bit about themselves, and not having them fear that they're writing like the particular thing about being Greek.
Sure. In reference to, those essays that are what students think we want to hear, that kind of essay will be something that is a sales pitch, but it's a slightly subtle sales pitch. So it'll be the common cliche essay. We see hundreds and hundreds of essays about students who are going to talk about a community service trip where they went to another area of the country or the world where they live, and they realized what a different way of life, and in many cases what a struggle life could be in that area, and what they take for granted. That's one of those essays that students flock to because, frankly, even if you have a very genuine experience doing community service, when someone says, think about how to represent yourself as like the best human being, the most altruistic community member, everyone's mind is going to go to that experience if that's something that they've done. So any of those essays that we receive hundreds of, in that vein, it's going to be very difficult to stand out as someone unique with that unique perspective. And so there are essays that can be topics that are truly meaningful to the individual, like doing service in another area of the world, a relative that they may have lost, and the reflection on that first major realization about mortality and the loss of a family member. Again, incredibly meaningful for the individual, but it is one of those topics that lots and lots of students are going to flock to. It will be challenging to stand out just in that particular competitive field. So if you want to write about one of those areas, you just have to know that you're going to be one of, in our pool of 3,000 applicants internationally, you might be one of 150 or 200 people, and you're trying to write the best essay out of 200 people. So if we're looking at selective institutions, we're applying for financial aid, we really want to stand out and capitalize on every opportunity. Something I tell students is that you actually need to think strategically, genuinely, and you're representing yourself and you're writing about something that means something to you, but you need to think strategically about what is going to be something that isn't a sales pitch, still puts you in your best light, and does stand out as being someone who is culturally international. If you were going to go with that last descriptor and talk about what it means to be you, and internationally, what it means to be Greek, you might reflect on, what do you expect to be the most different for you when you might be in a US college? What do you think you might miss? What are some of the beautiful moments that your mind will go to if in week 3 of your first college experience, you start to feel a little homesick? Would it be the food you would miss? Would it be your mother's kitchen and the rituals or the customs that you have around holidays and food and who's doing what? And, like Thanksgiving dinner is for me and my family. Because if you think of your day to day, it will be very different to come to an environment of all young people, because you're living in a residential setting with all of our other college students. And it's also going to be, of course, suburban American. It's going to be very different than living in a medium-sized city in Greece. And so reflect on those things that are simply going to be what you miss the most if you're choosing to write about something cultural, because that will help be a compass to point you to, what is a reader going to be very interested to learn? What do you estimate that most people who aren't from where you're from don't know? It's probably very easy for you to think of 100 interesting historical trivia, relevant facts to your life that I might not even be able to guess if I was on a game show and $65 million was riding on it. But for you, that's daily common knowledge. Your working knowledge is very different. Age has nothing to do with it. You will be able to teach someone something about your town, your culture, yourself, your language, your family, because they are not you and they don't know that information the way you know that internally. And so I would say you can go that direction. You don't have to look for big historical events necessarily. It can be personal and on a small scale. In the United States, I don't think anyone here has a pomegranate orchard. No one has the incredibly beautiful ocean that you have there. The geography, the experiences that you have are innately very different than we'll have here. And so if that's something that you choose to highlight, it will be strategic because we want those international perspectives on our campus. But it can be very genuine. It doesn't have to be large in scale.
That's, again, great advice, because I haven't thought of, we don't really think about these things like the ocean, as you said, or the trees. But we have a question in the chat that I think you may have answered partially, because Mary Bean is asking, through what criteria would you recommend filtering our ideas so that we settle on an idea that will best fit our essay? And one of the things that you told us about the traditions and the things that we miss from home is a great way to filter that for international students. But as we think of generally for that age group, let's say, of the student, internationally or US citizens, how do we filter these ideas? How do we know when an idea is not going to work?
I think the very first part of a funnel for me to move that idea forward or leave it off would be, out of 1,000 people, how many people could or would tell the same or a similar story? And your answer might be none. None of, this has never happened to anyone. This is unique to me. This is unique to my family. Even if someone has a knowledge of something, they wouldn't choose to highlight it as the most essential part of this experience or their life or their personality. That's a good reason to take a step forward with that idea. Is it the correct length I mentioned? Because the perfect story can only be told the right way in the right length. And so if it's a 10-page story that's very long and complex, not a good fit for the college essay, even if it's a great story. The same as if it's a simple image. If you want to talk about making breakfast one morning in a sun-splashed kitchen with your grandmother and knowing that she is moving away or ill or something that gives you a pang of the sense of the future or something serious, a reflective moment. Most of our essays are going to have a reflection, a conflict, a change, part of that coming of age. And so they're not all just images. Often there is a transition of this is when I realized I had a change in my thinking. This is when I had a realization. This is when I felt the difference between childhood and adulthood. Something like that typically fits in very well in the middle. It is important to convey this essay is going to fit, the story fits. And so if it's too simple and it's an image, also not the right topic because it'll probably be too short and you'll have to fluff it to make it 600 and some odd words. The next thing I would ask is it college appropriate? So we've had students who have had to overcome something very difficult and very personal. And that can be a very touchy way to approach your essay, because even if you are relating your soul through your writing, which is very tempting to do. A lot of us deeply connect emotionally when we write with what we want to share with an audience who isn't necessarily right in front of us. You do, at the baseline, need to remember that the environment that's reading this essay is deciding, are you going to be someone who is happy, healthy, thriving here on our college campus when you're 10,000 miles from home, away from your family? And so if the essay is a sensitive topic, then it might not be right for this exact purpose. And writing does lend to that sensitive, reflective thinking. So you just have to make sure that the topic is going to be a solid one for that reader to connect with you, but not worry or worry about whether you have fully overcome something that has been a barrier for you or if you're still in the midst of it. It's very important if you write about overcoming a barrier or a challenge or something like that that's very personal, it's in the past. It's something that you have completely learned from or changed from or seen the other side of. Another criteria is going to be whether it really does represent you. It's going to be something that is intrinsically deep to your values, your personality, your character. And now we've moved pretty far down that funnel. We've asked ourselves about 3 or 4 or 5 questions about whether this is the right topic, but more than one topic can fit through all of those hoops. And so you may find that you get an essay to a certain point of a draft, and if you have second thoughts about it or you want to try something else, you can keep it, move ahead with another topic, and then decide which one is going to represent me as a unique, interesting, engaging person, serious, funny, whichever, which is going to represent me best to this community of 9 or so readers. That's what a committee is typically made up of.
So, I mean, I think you answered the next question that we had, which is about vulnerability. And so Adonis is asking, and I think Adonis, you're referring to the topic of what we would miss when we are away from home. I think, if I'm reading this right, because you're asking, wouldn't this topic show vulnerability or hesitation from the student's part when coming to attend a U.S. college? And I think that you just told us the kind of vulnerability which could be a red flag, but there's a much, I think, a longer list of topics that show us as vulnerable human beings, but they're yet appropriate for a college level essay. So have you found that students have trouble finding that balance? You just told us an example of if it makes the reader worry about you, then obviously it's not the right venue, let's say, for this topic. But other than that, is there a difficulty with maybe talking about this nostalgia for home? Is there a point where the students should find that balance and then discuss it by showing vulnerability, but not losing control, let's say, of where this is where they want to address that?
Sure. It's super common and perfectly acceptable to see vulnerability or sensitivity in the essay. That indicates that someone has depth and thoughtfulness, and they don't just read what's on Facebook and watch cartoons, and they have a spirit about them. You can write an essay reflecting on how much your life is about to change if you go to the United States, and how much you're going to miss some of these specific things, and how much may have changed by the time you come back. So there is a bit of bittersweetness to that topic, but that is perfectly appropriate, because one of the common questions I ask students in some of my interviews is, out of a balance of 100, are you 50% nervous and 50% excited, or is it 90-10 or 90-10? Which way? And I've mostly heard students say that they are 50 to 90% excited, but nobody's ever said they're just 100% excited and they don't have a single bit of trepidation about crossing an ocean, saying goodbye to mom for the school year, making friends, living in a new city. That would be odd if you didn't have even a percent of that trepidation or reticence. Lots of students will weigh out until kind of the last month. What coast am I going to be on? Am I sure I want to go to the US? Should I be considering Australia? These things, we lie awake at night over these huge decisions that we're making and what we're committing to. So it's perfectly normal for you to share something that is thoughtful and bittersweet. But when I say choose a topic carefully, for example, if a student really, let's say in reference to the pandemic, if a student was writing about what their pandemic experience was, and there was a paragraph in that essay where they said, I didn't get out of bed for a week, I didn't comb my hair, I didn't feel like eating, life wasn't worth it without the pandemic and all of the negative things you could see on the news and in our own cities. If someone writes something like that about, let's say literally, that example of couldn't get out of bed or function because I was so crippled by this barrier, then especially in this era where we see more and more students with these high levels of stress or anxiety, and how to cope with them, and how to balance work and emotions and mental health, colleges, it may give them pause if they think they read enough into your personal writing to say, this is someone who is susceptible to having a full shutdown under great stress or pressure, because every college, friendly, small town, loving, great community, you're still going to have finals weeks and midterms weeks, and maybe you get homesick your third week in the United States. You're going to have those kinds of days that you just have to weather through. And so one of the qualities that we do want to know you have is resilience. And you can be someone who is sensitive, thoughtful, knows you're going to miss home, writes deeply, thinks deeply, but we still need to know that you're going to be someone who has the resilience to succeed far from home.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is so important, especially because of the year that we will be going through. And this is a chance to tell our audience that they can post any final questions. So this is your last chance, everybody. We are wrapping up. As we wait for any final questions, I do want to ask about any changes you may have seen this year, because that first round of applications was the first, let's say, in a pandemic. We thought it was going to be the last. Unfortunately, we head into another application round with possibly essays about how COVID disrupted our lives. But as a kind of like final comment, how did you see that year in writing, let's say? What kind of writing did this year produce from your end?
Well, you've touched on something I mentioned that was actually the case. Not only did we see hundreds and hundreds of essays about what the last year was, which we expected, because this is something, when you are 40 and 50 and 60, you are going to look back on the year the world shut down as being singularly different, informative, and it's changed the timeline of many young students' lives. If they had to take a gap year, if they changed plans, absolutely affected everyone. I don't know anyone who was untouched professionally, financially, emotionally, extended families, many of us lost someone or more than one person in a larger family group. And I don't fault a lot of students for choosing that as a topic, even though they knew everyone was going to write about it, because a lot of students had different perspectives to share. And some of them were very dramatically affected by COVID and wanted to share what the last year has been like for them. And we have seen a very high number of students who said, I was completely devastated and affected by this, and it affected my schoolwork. And some of them took the opportunity to address a change in their grades. So I could say that might have been strategic, because they knew that an admissions officer was going to say, you know, well, there's this huge drop off here in involvement and in grades, and, you know, and of course we know it aligns with the timeline of the pandemic. But if you feel that it would be strategic for you to address reflectively and maturely what was going on, and you can write in the right way about that, you can talk about something that shows us this is temporary, and it was an unforeseen setback. You experienced the setback, and here is how you have changed, grown, developed, adapted, shown resilience. And so a lot of students did take that opportunity. I imagine we will continue to see lots of essays about the year the world stopped going out.
Yeah, that's as sad as that is. At least it is interesting to have the students document that in this important essay, an important stage in their lives, and hopefully it is making us look at things differently. So who knows, maybe it is helping in some ways. If we can make something good out of this very negative experience. Mm-hmm. So we don't have any other questions right now, and we are at the end of our session. So I just want to thank you so much, Carly, for taking the time to talk to us about this important and standard part of the application that's gonna affect us. I don't see that. I see that as the only thing that will never change. Whatever happens to test scores, I don't think the essay is going anywhere. So it was really good to have a chance to listen to your tips and help.
Sure. I know I went through lots of information very quickly. I hope that that's going to be very helpful to you, and that you have heard some ideas that you didn't find anywhere else in your research, or where you may have looked for some essay writing tips. As I said, it's a passion of mine. I'm happy to be in touch with students that have questions about anything I've mentioned. If you want to piggyback a question on topics that we didn't expand on, feel free to email me at Franklin and Marshall to follow up.
Great, thank you so much. And same here, if anybody wants to ask anything. Thank you so much for being here with us and joining us, and have a good rest